This is for first name for all the Cholim of Israel. And speedy first name for all. Okay, so just one or two short ideas. In Parashat Ki Tzedze, which I read through the other day, it's one ahead of Shoftim. It says something which relates to sensitivity. It says the love of Hashem. I'm reading from the Chumash, the Hirsch Chumash, which is like 40 years old. The love of Hashem regards not only to the poor and the slave, but takes account also of the lower creatures. And then it says here, one of the things it says in the text is, you should not muzzle an ox, and especially when it's involved in labor and when there's food that it likes to eat in front of it. If you muzzle it, it's actually considered cruel, because if it sees it before its eyes, it eventually wants to eat something. I mean, it's a natural instinct. And if the message is, which may have been repeated thousands of times, if we have to show sensitivity to animals, how much more so to human beings, and to be empathetic, sympathetic to their needs. And maybe if the ox is muzzled too much, maybe you won't have muzzle with the output of the ox.
What do you mean?
It's a joke, Damon.
It's a joke, Damon.
It might not perform well. I said with the output. Yeah. It might not be so motivated.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Gavin, did you get that?
Got such a headache. I tried. I'll have to get you to explain it to me later. All right.
All right, guys. Let's we're on the 110th daf. So what we want to know is Rava poses another inquiry. Are Kohanim permitted to divide their shares in the robbed? So we discussed this concept yesterday in brief. I'll just tell you what it is. Rava inquired, are Kohanim permitted to divide their shares in the robbed property of a convert against their shares in other robbed property of a convert? Do we say that the merciful one called the returned property in Asham, meaning it has a degree of sanctity similar to that of an Asham offering for a false oath, even though you're paying back the principal? And the reason why it's called an Asham is there's no, whilst you might be able to get an atonement, you certainly can't make a restitution of any sort to not only the aggrieved party nor his heirs, because a convert doesn't have a lack children in this particular example. So just as with respect to an Asham offering, so it's far more serious. The law is that the Kohanim cannot divide one Asher offering against another offering. So too with respect to robbed property, the law is that if it's termed, in this case, an Asham offering, it's not like it's robbed property of a person that's alive, but then you just reimburse, and you can do it over a myriad of payments to the aggrieved party, but you wouldn't have to give it to the Kohen either way. So too with respect to robbed property, the law is that they cannot divide the robbed property of a convert against the robbed property of another convert. That's one proposition. The other proposition is perhaps, unlike the meat and hides of an Asham offering, the robbed property of a convert is actually just a monetary possession of the Kohanim and doesn't have that inherent sanctity as does an altar offering that comes from a kapora for a chatas offering of a false oath, and thus they can exchange their portions in it. So what are we saying? We said, guys, that if it's proposed that a Kohen can tell his fellow, okay, you take a share of my property that I got from the robber who is returning the convert's stolen property, and there's another convert, and I like in particular that return property from him. You don't like collecting stamps, but you like motor vehicles. So let's do a bit of a swap here in a barter. So what did we learn in Kedushin 53a? And it's derived from the Chumash, that Kohanim cannot barter the shares of sacred offerings that are awarded in the temple. That's according to Rashi. So each individual rather must be divided. In other words, each individual offering specifically must be divided among all the Kohanim serving in the temple on the base of, which means in that particular day. And when a Kohen receives his portion, he may only eat it or give it to another Kohen for consumption. Cannot, however, use it to make any sort of transaction, because it's not considered his property in any legal sense. We say that it's the property of the Most High, and that we are guests at Hashem's table if you're a Kohen, and he merely allows the Kohen to partake in eating it. And it's part of his service, the Kohen. So if two Kohanim do trade their respective portions, the trade is ineffective. So if one Kohen took his fellow share in an offering and ate it, on the understanding that he would compensate him with an equivalent share in another offering, the other Kohen is not entitled to the stipulated compensation. So, guys, there's certainly some distinction between meat of offerings and robbed property of a convert. Why? Because, as I explained earlier, the meat of offerings remain property of the Most High, even after the Kohanim have received it. Okay, meaning there's a certain degree of sanctity and decorum in the way it's consumed and what you do with the bones, etc. But the robbed property of a convert does become the Kohanim's personal property upon distribution, but after the Kohen receives his share, he can certainly sell or exchange it. So that's a suggestion in Menachos 73a. On the other hand, the suggestion is until the robber returns the property to the Mishmar, it's actually treated like an Asham offering, because as Rava said, you can't return it at night or in halves, and you haven't discharged your obligation. So Rava says here, listen, this is where the question is. We're not talking about classic repayment of principal here. We're saying that the status of the property during the interim before, it's basically between the return to the head of the Mishmar and the distribution to the individual Kohanim. So do we say that it's considered like an Asham offering until the Kohanim actually receive their shares, and then they cannot contract to trade the shares before receiving it? In other words, they have to wait a certain period of time. Or maybe you can say, listen, eventually the Kohen do get it for their personal property, and then it's only compared to an Asham offering until it's returned to the head of the Mishmar. But from the moment the head of the Mishmar receives it, it's known as the cooperative property of the Mishmar, therefore each Kohen has to get a pruta's worth. So if the property of two converts were returned to the head of the Mishmar, and a Kohen arranged to relinquish his own share of the property in exchange for his fellow share in the other, the transaction will stand. So what we're saying is these are the two sides of the argument. There hasn't been a ruling yet. Okay? So the Gemara says, after raising the inquiry, Rava resolved it. The merciful one called the converts robbed property an Asham, and therefore the Kohanim cannot exchange their portions in it. So what are we saying is, Rava's basically conceding that the term Asham refers to some sanctity, and whether it's the principle for a false oath. The minute that term in the Chumash is applied, it then is effectual even against stolen property returned as a principle. And it actually still stands against distribution to the individual Kohanim. So, and what does that indicate? That property belongs to the Kohanim applies only after its distribution to the individuals in the Mishmar. Okay, so we're learning another issue as far as Rava is concerned, and that is, so this is initially posed as a question because, guys, just give me 1 second. I'm just pausing something.
Most spiritual people, Dame,
I want to hear
even
your
the most
question.
spiritual people, okay, find it difficult to separate spirituality to physical things.
Yeah, which
Where
means
it
they're
comes
not
from.
which means they're not the most spiritual people. We live lives of contradiction. That's
Yeah, no,
exactly.
I understand that, but it's just showing you that even spiritual people are human beings that, you know, ev- everybody struggles to, we want to be spiritual, but we live in a physical world. I mean, it's, to
I
get the
actually
balance
think
right,
that's
it's
a good
difficult. You
point.
got a body and a soul. You got a
I think,
body and a soul. Two things that
yeah,
are always fighting each other,
I think that's
you
a
know?
good point. And I think one of the other points that Arthur raised is that Kohanim are like other people in that they also have struggles in terms of ethics and choices. That's actually quite true, Art. I didn't think of it like that, but that's actually the essence of it, is that they might be very holy and they might be Hashem's conduit in earth, but they certainly have their cravings and their
They're still
desires and
physical. They're still
their
physical beings. It's not like
exactly.
they, above anybody else. In
Yeah,
fact, I
and
think it's harder being a Cohen and more restrictive than being a regular guy. I wouldn't want to be a Cohen. Sorry about that, Gav, but
I was going to say,
your limitations are limited.
No, ask
I'm
Damon
just
how many
saying.
times I've tried to get out of it because it's very tricky. I, I,
yeah,
I even searched on Chatbox
see?
GPT and they told me to get lost.
Do the paid version at 4.0, you'll find a way.
Yeah, if I don't have the money. As soon as I get paid, I'm going to consider it.
So
Okay.
the funniest thing is when Gavin had a fight with me and he blasted me and said, "You shouldn't have told everybody I was a Cohen," and called me up because
Yeah,
that when he first became film, it affected his dating prospects. And I said to him, I said to him, Gavin, listen, even behind closed doors, there's rules. I said, whether I make it public or not, you're a Cohen. Take the honor because you're going to have to take the limitations.
What, you fool?
But he was ticked day for weeks. He was
yeah.
seething.
Well, that day, I promise you, if there weren't witnesses, Damon would be like he'd be history. That they were. We were at Mahasha Shul. I'll just tell them quickly because you didn't say it 100% correctly, but it's close enough. Just,
These are the
what
reasons
happened?
why
We
we
were
stay
at
silent.
Mahasha, and it came to the section where they have to call up the Kohanim. We have to go Vas. Damon's in front of everybody, shouts, "Gavin, go Vas, go Vas," and he pushes me and everything, and he forces me to go and duchen. And I said to him, "What the hell are you doing, China?" And it was too late. Like everybody saw, the whole shul saw. The rabbi saw, Rabbi Raf, Smotovitz, everybody knew all of a sudden I'm a Cohen. Now I'm in a mess, right? And I didn't want to publicize it in case I wanted to get out of it, right? Anyway, it was early days. I wasn't from properly. I believed in Hashem, but it was early days. So you haven't quite grasped the whole concept yet. So I was wobbly. And when you're wobbly, if you can get out of something, if you can duck and dive, for some reason you think Hashem's not going to spot it. But obviously, as it shows you how naive you are when you first start. All right, carry on.
Gav, I'm still, even though I'm whatever. I hate going up in front of the show, even if it's through the tour or anything. It's nerve wracking. Like you got everybody's eyes on you.
No, it wasn't
No,
because of that. I just didn't want to publicize that I was a Cohen in case I wanted to marry a divorcee. I didn't want to have that problem. And I
it
also
might
thought
be
that
a
there
slight
might,
problem when you get
yeah,
to marrying her.
listen, I was hoping that there'd still be a loophole
Mm.
somewhere, but that's actually what I was looking for. And I went to
Okay.
loophole.com and it said it doesn't exist. All right. Neither the
Okay.
site nor the thing. All
But
right,
I
carry
saw
on. I
this
just want to make
flash
Okay.
sure
of
there's
Okay.
no
Carry on.
madness.
Yeah.
Kohanim are known to have a bit of temper, so I saw this flash of madness in his eyes, and I thought to myself, right, I better go scarce for a while. So I went in the witness protection program.
Yeah.
All right, so listen, and the first way the Gemara presents it is as if Rava had a question on this issue. There's an alternative version. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, taught Rava's original statement, okay, not as an inquiry, guys, but as an explicit ruling. Because the Kohanim, according to Rava, cannot divide their shares in the robbed property of a convert against their shares in other robbed property of a convert. What is the reason? Because the merciful one calls the convert's robbed property an asham. So it's not even a question. And why? It has a higher degree of severity and thus sanctity to rectify the sin, because that person is no longer alive where you can actually make some sort of restitution to them or their heirs. So now there's atonement, but there's not proper restitution. So therefore that atonement is far more serious as far as that's concerned. Now, just one thing to bear in mind. There is another inquiry by Rava. But what I'd like to do is, I know we're ending a little bit early tonight because in 20 minutes there is a share. But the problem is the next 3 or 4 pages are a conversation that is going to follow up on each other. So I don't want to start it halfway, and I don't want to be late for Rav Simcha. And quite honestly, I had 3 hours of sleep or 3.5 hours last night, and I feel absolutely brutalized.
Yeah, so do I. So I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Damon, should we stop at 1:30 then, or 10 minutes?
No, we're stopping now, I think.
We can stop now. I hope you don't
Can I
mind.
just okay, but just for another 2 minutes.
Sure.
So you were saying, what was the main issue you were talking before we?
The main
had this
issue
guy
is that
that you were discussing earlier.
what we were saying is 2 Kohanim eventually received the robbed property. Why
Yeah.
do the firstly, it's not the base of that receive it, because it's not the daily Kohanim of the Mishmar that get it. It's the whole Mishmar for the week. Why? Because robbery is a very serious offense. It's not like a daily offering which goes to the base of. So therefore, all the Kohanim share it. So what it's proposing is, once the Kohanim each get their share, do we say that there's, look, if you look at Jews, there are in a community thousands of Jews. There's not going to be one person that commits a robbery. Unfortunately, there's going to be more than one. And therefore, if they bring in an estate and say it's not an animal that you sacrifice, but this one's got automobiles, and this one's got books, and the one guy isn't a car person, but the other guy is a book person, and vice versa, when they get it, can they swap with each other? That's the question of the Gemara. Can they swap what they've gotten as Kohanim from the robber who's returned it in order to get an atonement? And do we say it's basically a monetary issue? And of course they can swap it. Okay, not when it's initially accepted in the Mishmar, because that's in the Talmud, but once it gets redistributed to each of the Kohanim.
Yeah.
Or do we perhaps say, Kevin, that at the end of the day, because the principle here in Bamidbar Numbers chapter 5 verse 7 where and verse 8, where it talks about specifically if the convert dies and leaves no heirs, it's now referred to as an ashram offering, the principle. Does it take on a high degree of sanctity? Because we learn that the principle, as far as that's concerned, is now treated as a degree of sanctity. Why? Because the principle cannot be paid back in halves, because if the guy's alive, the courts can say, listen, he doesn't have the money all at once, can he pay over a number of months? But here he has to bring it in one day, the principle, because if it's treated as just give me one sec, Kev. If it's treated as an asham offering, like say it's an asham offering for a false oath, you can't bring it to one day, half the amount in one day for the other, because we said it's got to be the value of 2 silaim. So you can't bring an animal for 1 silaim one day and 1 silaim for another, because it doesn't contain the atonement extra. And since in this case it's for atonement value and not restitution, because the convert has passed away and there's no heirs because he doesn't have a lucky children, and there's no legal case, he's only coming open and honest because he wants atonement, and therefore it's treated as an ashram in that it can't be offered at night nor in 2 halves. Because if I share a pasuk with you, as you'll see, give me a sec, guys. According to Kevin, you'll see this. But if a man has no kinsman to whom the asham can be returned, that's referring to a convert that left no heirs to be able to act as the plaintiff against the robber. The asham, which is now referred to as the principle that is returned, is for Hashem. Now, returned is the term for the 1/5 surcharge, aside from the ram of atonement, which is for the false oath. And all of those things will provide atonement. So since the principle is here is referred to an asham, we learned that the Kohanim cannot barter it. They cannot barter it because it takes on that added degree of sanctity, and therefore it's a problem. And where do we find this, Kevin? In Kedushin 53a, that Kohanim may not barter the shares of sacrificial offerings that they were awarded in the temple. That's according to Rashi.
Is a Kochim.
Yeah.
But this, so going back to the stolen article from the convert who then died, and the thief, the robber, couldn't make restitution or atonement, and that robber is a Kohen. That's the whole issue here.
No, before the issue was the Kohen, who the Kohen said, listen, since I legally own the property because there's nobody to sue me for it, why can't I bring it as a sacrifice and enjoy the meat and hearts, or keep it in its entirety? And we're saying only a Kohen can keep the meat and hearts. If he bought an animal legitimately, then he doesn't have to have his mishmar on duty. He's given deference as a Kohen, and he can do it even if his mishmar isn't on duty.
Because I mean, when that convert does, and it's basically not. It's not legitimate.
It's not kosher.
Why should it?
Illegal,
why should it even
kosher.
be considered for offering in the temple if it's not?
Kevin just asked an excellent question. How can something that's so sullied for theft be considered worthy for sacrifice? Kevin, brilliant question. So the reality is, at that point, there's no restitution. But the only way he can make restitution to his own soul, at least, even though it's not to the convert and the heirs, is to be able to not get benefit. In other words, say you found a briefcase in your car of money, okay, and you want to keep it, but you found out that it's from a drug cartel and many people died for that money. It's even got bloodstains on it. Now, yes, you can keep it and give to some of the money to tzedakah, but then you're part of that whole process in Shemayim of the blood trail. It just happened to land with you, the money, but people died for that money. The best thing you can do is give that money away and give it all to tzedakah and say, I want no party in it. I don't want any benefit from it. I'm not having any vested interest in it. There's complete altruism to give it to tzedakah. So what the robber has to do is saying, listen, I cannot make restitution to the aggrieved party, but what I can do is get no benefit from it, and it's the least I can do. And therefore, who are you going to give it to? If you're going to return it, you can't throw it in fresh air, Kevin. You have to give it to tzedakah. And then it was the equivalent of the Kohanim on behalf of Hashem, who could derive benefit as a sacrifice. So you would sacrifice your personal gain, because the reason you stole was because you were greedy, not you, Kevin, as in the proverbial robber. And therefore, the only way to fix and remedy that action is to get no derived financial benefit, to eliminate the greed as your main motive by giving it to the Kohen. So it takes on the sanctity, it takes on a sanctity because your act initially was horrendous, and you have some sort of redemption, at least, if not restitution, by the fact that you say, I don't want any benefit of my bad virus. I don't want to benefit from my virus. I want to at least not get something out of it. That goes a long way towards atonement and correcting a bad midah of greed. So therefore, that elevated level creates a sanctity to give it as almost a carbonus, as an usher, for that alone.
Like a donation, basically.
Well, more than a donation, it takes on a form of sanctity, because you've gone from a level of committing a spiritual and crime, even if it's not illegal, because there's no plaintiff to sue you, but you've certainly committed a spiritual crime and an injustice at the very least. And therefore, you've turned that into, why did you do it? Because the robber wanted the financial gain. So if he gives up the motive at which he committed the crime, that sort of elevated spiritual level creates a holiness within that article that provides a certain degree of atonement. I don't know to what degree, because there's no restitution, but certainly it's the best mechanism he has at his disposal, and he gives it to the Kohanim to be able to keep amongst themselves. So therefore, that elevated act is what creates the infused sacrificial holy nature of it. Do you get it, guys?
Hmm.
Okay, does it make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys, have a great evening.
Can I
Thank
just
you.
give you just an observation?
Sure.
Sorry.
I want to say something after Gavin. So just,
Sure.
Mine's just an observation. I think Kohanim are immune to gout because they eat beef or lamb. That's all they eat every single day. So I'm just saying, I think they have an immunity because I eat a lot of meat and I don't have gout, thank God. I think, when you go on a plane, it's fish, meat or fish, right? Yeah, you don't have that option. I think fish and chicken should have been part of the sacrificial thing, so Kohanim couldn't get gout. So maybe meat doesn't actually cause gout.
No, well, firstly, when you go on a keto diet and you don't have all those processed carbs and sugars, you're not going to have gout because hyperuricemia is caused from erratic blood sugar levels to start with. And then if your pancreas and liver don't take strain from the erratic blood levels, then immediately it eliminates the gout. So as far as Kohanim concerned, there's no gout and there's no doubt.
I was going to say this.
Firstly, that was classic. Well done
basically,
and very good answer. Well done. Thank you. I didn't know that.
Basically, I found when I cut out all the crap, right, I get less inflammation in my body. And the whole thing was like high sugar creates inflammation. Once you get inflammation, it causes gout.
Yeah. So I do have an inflammation problem. Luckily I don't have gout, but I have back.
No, but there's different
pain
types
right
of
throughout the whole
inflammation in your body. Yeah,
I've got major
types.
inflammation.
Yeah.
But I eat nothing processed. I have nothing processed, and I'm waiting for results. I've been doing this now, nothing processed for about.
Hopefully, when I get that cow and I steal it, I'll bring it to you. You can eat it the whole year. You gotta find one, but it'll be okay.
But I can't have three.
Actually,
I don't want 3 cows in a row. I want one day cow, one day lamb, one day cow, one day lamb. Please, guys, you got to be fair.
Okay, I'll try my best.
So you know what? You'll find a robber, Gavin, that stole a cow and then made a false oath where he brings a ram of atonement. You're going to get a nice variety. And then Kevin.
Mate, but you don't actually want another yet to be a robber.
Mate. You don't want another yet to be a robber. Exactly.
That's what I just said. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I retract that, mate. That's why I qualified it. You saw that.
You did.
I realized as I was saying it, this doesn't sound too good.